A trade loophole closed on Friday, and it could have a massive impact for American consumers. You see, millions of Americans, they have flocked to sites like Temu and Shein, drawn in by some of these Chinese e-commerce sites, I should say, by some of those extremely low prices and a big variety of products. And that's partially because of the de minimis exemption, which allowed packages worth less than $800 to enter the U.S. duty-free. Well, that exemption actually expired on May 2nd, and prices, they have already soared on some of these sites in recent weeks. Temu, for example, they ended shipments from China to the U.S. and only fulfilling American orders from within that country, also imposing some of these new tariffs and duties. Well, that has led to some shipping delays, and all of this is happening amid the uncertainty of Donald Trump's trade war. At one point, the U.S. had imposed a tariff of 145% on Chinese goods. That's been temporarily reduced for most goods to 30%. So what does all this mean? Let's explore all of this with exactly what this means for Chinese e-commerce platforms and American consumers that shop there. Joining us is Yao Henry Jin. He's an associate professor of supply chain management at Miami University, joining us live from Westchester, Ohio. Professor, thank you for getting up early for us.
Not a problem at all. Thanks for having me.
So we've heard some folks refer to this as a sort of tariff ceasefire agreement, this break from these tariffs. This exemption also allowed companies like Shein and Temu to really thrive until that loophole was done away with. What do you think has fueled the Trump administration's desire to go after these specific companies that are providing some pretty low-cost goods like apparel to American consumers?
Well, so for one thing, the sheer volume of these goods that have been coming across the border in recent years have really left a large portion of goods, especially in things like apparel, that are rather heavily taxed, if you will, for imports. And these have not been levied any duties on. And for the most part, consumers were benefiting from being able to pay, to your point, lower prices, much lower than what they otherwise would have had to pay at a store like Forever 21 or some of the other fast fashion goods where retailers import in large volumes and that they do have to pay these import tariffs on. And so for Donald Trump, part of going after the de minimis is really an extension from the Biden era when our policymakers started to pay attention to say, hey, we have all of these packages coming through the border that is clogging up our customs, and a lot of times we have no way of tracing what is exactly inside these packages.
So if the U.S. market is no longer an option, where do you think these low-cost Chinese manufacturers will turn to, Professor? Is it hard to replace consumers in the U.S.?
Absolutely. So from consumers' perspective, the U.S. consumers have outsized spending power compared to many other consumer markets. And so in regard to being able to find consumers who are willing to pay a certain level of prices for their goods, yes, U.S. consumers are difficult to replace. Now, what we've also been seeing is these companies have been pivoting towards markets like Australia, like the EU, which is also the reason why we start to see these countries trying to coordinate a response towards what's the so-called low-valued goods coming across the border.
Let's talk about what's next, Professor, especially for this business model that companies like Temu have relied on, which is essentially provide this vast selection of direct-to-consumer products at a cheap price. I mean, I've seen some reporting out there that this could potentially spell the end of fast fashion. Is that the case in the Trump tariff world?
No, not at all. I do not believe that this is going to spell the end of fast fashion. What it is going to spell is the end of this particular type of fast fashion that Shein is offering. Because if you think about fast fashion as a category, it really didn't start with Shein. Instead, it started with companies like Zara and H&M, and they have been thriving, and they did thrive even during the era of the de minimis goods coming across the border. And so what it ultimately means is retailers like Shein and Temu, they're going to have to adapt to basically a new reality. Now, what we have started to see is that Shein has been shipping goods across directly from China into the U.S. even after the closure of the de minimis loophole. And for Temu, in recent weeks, Temu actually started to resume some of their direct from China shipments into the U.S. And so what we know is certain categories, even with the 30%, 54%, and up tariffs, they're still viable as far as serving the U.S. consumer market is concerned. What we've also seen is Temu has really shifted to this Amazonification model where, as you mentioned earlier, that they open up US-based warehouses for local shipping. And so the closure of this de minimis loophole is not necessarily going to spell the end of Temu and Shein in the United States, but what it will do is we're going to see fewer selection, and we're going to see higher prices and possibly slower service speed when it comes to packages being shipped directly from China.
This new reality that you described, Professor, it'll be interesting to see if perhaps retailers like H&M, for example, see this more as an evening of the playing field with the removal of this loophole. Professor, we have to leave it there, but just some fascinating insight, especially for so many people in the United States to turn to these sites to fill their closets up. Professor Yao, Henry Jin, really appreciate your expertise.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.